James fucking Dean. What is there to say that hasn't already been said? The man is a legend whether you like it or not. In his brief yet iconic film career, Dean continues to provide viewers with modern, emotionally resonating, and thought-provoking content through his big three films: East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and Giant. All with their own mythos and academic discourse. The common thread throughout them is Dean, who elevated the material with his brand of mischief, wanting, and longing. What we can see on screen scarily mirrors what he was like in real life, and according to some sources, only exaggerated slightly. Dean is heralded as a genius in the acting community, rightfully so, but many who knew him claim that, bubbling just below the surface, was a lonely boy who longed for stability, notoriety, and belonging.
You should have shot that fellow a long time ago. Now he's too rich to kill.
After his death, he became a larger phenomenon, creating a frenzy of fans that continues to this day. Aspects of the Dean mythos have made their way into projects to pay homage to the actor, to showcase parts of his life that are brimming with dramatic irony or scathing commentary on fame, loneliness, and destruction. A rousing portrait becomes clear when these films are looked at collectively. A man of immense complexity who was not only talented, but jealous, spiteful, loving, compassionate, and drifting. Many of these films share details, namely the filming of his first leading role in East of Eden, but use his life events to demonstrate a certain field of view, a certain interpretation of events in his life. The films explore his sexuality, his past, and most importantly, his relationships. As mysterious as Dean could be to his friends, there's enough wiggle room to create real poignancy in this story and to showcase something thematically cohesive. While these films aren't all-encompassing, as a collective, they paint a full enough picture. This video is being made with the assumption you already have a rudimentary knowledge of Dean's life and career, and additional context will be given on a subject if it strays far away enough from that base know-how. But with that, let's get down to it.
There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy.
2 years after his death, literally hot off the presses, a documentary about the star was directed by Robert Altman, The James Dean Story. The film is a mix of home video footage, behind-the-scenes outtakes, interviews with people who knew Dean, and still photographs. Originally conceived as a traditional biopic with Elvis as Dean, the project was scaled down, presumably to get something out to cash in on his death. As cynical as that last statement is, there is some truth to it. There's some real effort here in the filmmaking, but that term is kind of used loosely. Altman and crew took the time to interview Marcus and Hortense, his aunt and uncle, the owner of the restaurant that Dean frequented, and a New York cab driver friend.
First time I met Jimmy, he had a date with a girlfriend of mine. Brought her over to meet me. I didn't know who he was. He hadn't been in the movies yet. He was on TV, but I drove a hack at night, and I never saw him.
The breadth of photos collected for presentation is also admirable, as there's a lot of content here. The soundtrack, mostly scored by Chet Baker standards, gives a real avant-garde feel to it all.
They wore what he wore. They walked as he walked. They played the parts they saw him play. And they searched for the answers they thought he was searching for.
There are also some real hokey moments scattered throughout, often pretentiously so.
He looked at the ocean, and he was jealous of its power.
Like, what does this even mean? The cheapness of the movie is also stated blatantly up front. Dynamic exploration of the still photograph. What the fuck? Like, I get it. Ken Burns wasn't around yet to emulate, so we're coming up with an excuse to feature mostly photos in a moving picture. Right.
Power.
The depth of these interviews are surface level and unrevealing, with extremely stilted replies from their subjects.
Was he much help on the farm?
Very good help with machinery, and was very good with livestock up to his Junior year of high school.
The most interesting by far is the interview with his high school drama teacher, where she shares a story that is indicative of Dean's impact on her and those around him.
I have a picture here of an orchid that Jimmy painted for me. It was the day following the first showing of the junior play. The cast gave me this orchid, or gave me an orchid, and it was the first orchid I'd ever received. Jimmy, who made the presentation then, came over and gave me a kiss. The next day he came into my classroom and asked for the orchid. I didn't know what the child wanted. He took it to the art class and painted this for me, which I have prized through the years. Then he said, "Now you can keep your orchid forever."
This is what I came to see. More of this, please. Otherwise, you have a lot of people praising him for his abilities and how bizarre but benign he was in life. The film is notable for its inclusion of the safe driving PSA Dean filmed before his death.
I think I'd better take off.
Oh, wait a minute, Jimmy. One more question. Do you have any special advice for the young people who drive?
Take it easy driving. Life you might save might be mine.
And an at the time, never before seen screen test for East of Eden.
You're the one that Dad loves. He doesn't love me, never has. This is my son. Aaron, that is, thinks I got a great idea here. This mother's son, Cal, who saved his money when we were kids and bought him a beautiful jackknife. And you got him a lousy, mangy little old dog you picked up somewhere. Well, he loved that dog, Aaron. He didn't even say thank you for my jackknife. Didn't say nothing.
As we will come to see, these words are very telling to Dean's character in his personal life. Altman ultimately created a documentary about the fanaticism of a figure, of celebrity. He would go on to later satirize this in his film Nashville, but since it's played straight here, it shows the audience exactly what this is. A cash grab. Of course, other documentaries about Dean's life would come out decades after his death with far more comprehensive views on him, even interviewing those who might not have had the most positive view on the actor. But that complexity is what should be striven for when examining someone's life. Dean's genius is only one part of the puzzle, so summing up his life as a series of brilliance is kind of off the mark and fundamentally misunderstands someone who was beloved and touched many hearts, but left others with more complicated feelings. As a kitschy jumping-off point for Dean fans, this could be considered a must-watch, but if you're looking for a deeper exploration of Dean's notoriety, it's best to look elsewhere. The meat of the video will come in this section, as there's much more to dissect here. There have been many Dean biopics throughout the years, with some spanning the entirety of his career and others narrowing the focus to a specific time in his life. As mentioned, many of these share events and characters, but show them in different lights given the goals of the narrative. Movies that share similar DNA will be referenced within examinations of the other films. In 1976's James Dean, Portrait of a Friend, Dean is played by Stephen McHattie, who does a decent job.
Expensive, though. What's the matter, tired of pretending life?
Yeah, guess not my speed.
You're not supposed to do that.
This film covers the most ground out of the rest, showing us Dean's college days and ending with his death. The supporting character, really a co-lead, is Michael Brandon as William Bast. Yes, that Michael Brandon.
Puff Scarlowy as he raced down the hill.
Bast is famous for his writing talent, but also for being one of Dean's closest friends while he was alive. Bast went on to write 2 books about his relationship with Dean, claiming that they were intertwined so much he never really knew if they were truly in love with one another. Throughout, Dean is shown to be a person with talent that draws everybody into him, someone you just can't keep your eyes off of. So intrigued, you want to spend time with him. However, once you're lured into his orbit, You'll find an intensely brooding and sad young actor who will take and take without giving all that much. Or someone who is extremely neglectful of those around him, using any connection he has to climb his way to success.
How'd you make out? Over at CBS.
I start Monday. Doesn't pay much, but work is work. Gotta start somewhere. Hey, maybe I could get you in too.
What, you mean it, Willie? Oh, that'd be fantastic.
However, these narrative decisions do not contribute in demonizing Dean. Almost the opposite. They show resolve on his part and tenacity in networking. Notably, Bast is the one who gets Jimmy survival jobs and a foot in the door with studios, as Bast's career in writing had already taken off a bit before Dean's performance career. Bast, feeling like he's only in Dean's life to be a spectator, decides to break things off with their friendship to give each other space.
Please. Don't go, Willie. You're the only friend I got.
You don't need a friend, Dina. You need a spectator.
But Bast flits in and out of his life due to Dean's hunger to further his career. But why he did this is up to debate. In the book, The Real James Dean, compiled by Peter L. Winkler, Bast writes, "Out of a growing awareness that he needed people and had to exist in a world full of them, Jimmy had begun to develop a knack for complementing their egos. This he accomplished by taking a deep and sincere interest in the things they liked most. This was another tactic on creating favor with those who had power to help him get ahead." In this example, Bast describes Jimmy's relationship with up-and-coming Broadway producer Lemuel Ayers, and Dean's interest in Ayers' interest in boats as the impetus for his casting in his first Broadway play, See the Jaguar. Did Dean really have an interest in boats? Tough to call here, but my guess would be
no.
Did this interest gain him a significant step toward achieving his goals?
Yes.
The nature of his ruthlessness isn't totally explored here and comes across as unintentionally malicious. To Bast's recollection, Dean is a person who never really learned to cope with being alone, or how to engage and grow professionally.
Sandy's gonna follow in the station wagon. Plenty of room. Sure you don't want to come along?
I got a script to write, remember?
Well, can it wait?
Not if you knew my producer. He's got a mean streak this wide.
I just thought I'd ask.
It's a shame this relationship would be so tainted for Bast, as Dean was known to be quite the romantic, platonically and otherwise. Dean's portrayal as a sexually fluid person is shown in the 1976 movie, where he has this pretty explicit scene with him and Bast in their underwear.
What's it about?
What if this guy had a thing once with his best friend? Ever since, it's been tearing him apart.
That's a rough one.
But otherwise, he's shown to be strictly heterosexual.
We could be back in 24 hours.
Bast had a hand in writing this teleplay, hence the gay subtext. His bisexual allure is partly what keeps his memory alive today. He effortlessly floats between love scenes with Julie Harris and Natalie Wood, and fiery chemistry with co-stars Sal Mineo and Rock Hudson as well, both now well-known gay men. Dean's showcase as prime, hetero, masculine lover is on full display in most of these movies. Dean had many girlfriends throughout his short life, and one of his early relationships was with actress Dizzy Sheridan. In the context of the film, Bast and Dean have their moment, and it's immediately followed by Dean dating Dizzy. These skeptical looks on Bast's face say a lot.
Cut it out, will you?
What kind of resentment is there? Does he wish he could be the one slumped on Dean's shoulder, kissing him in this cafe? And did Dean move on to Dizzy to foster some kind of reaction in Bast? How Bast perceived Dean's intentions versus Dean's actual intentions are only known between the two men, but it's fascinating to speculate on. That is, until we get to the wildest of the Dean biopics I watched for this project, Joshua Tree 1951, A Portrait of James Dean. I can only really describe this as the most artsy out of everything we'll discuss. and that it has an extremely limited cast, is shot in black and white, and features some very tasteful nudity that comes across as gratuitous and some would call pornographic. Like, seriously. Joshua Tree shows us a James Dean that likes to fuck, and will do what he needs to do to get ahead. It's ruthlessly sexy and shallow.
You can hit me if you want.
Cutest one. You're so sweet.
Here, Dean lives with a Bast stand-in, credited as the roommate. The roommate and Dean have an explicitly sexual relationship amidst Dean's other sexual relationships with both men and women. Dean is implied to be living with him not only for a place to stay, but because the two are truly in love. But not only are Dean and the roommate getting busy, but Dean is ogled and groped by Hollywood producers too, and seems to have little agency in his success until he decides to get what he wants from them.
I don't make it on my talent alone. I don't want to make it at all.
There's also the typical Dean idolatry, and yes, it's cheesy, but I don't care. The film look is pretty. Now, how much of Joshua Tree can be corroborated is really up for debate. There are sources that will tell you that Dean's only way of getting recognition was fucking his way into the business, while others will tell you he was molested and groped by these people and had the power and wanted to use him. I'm not at liberty to say what is true. The angle Joshua Tree takes is definitely unique in this lineup, but it is far from a nuanced likeness of Dean's actual intentions and circumstances. Dean had famously said he would not go through life with only one hand tied behind his back, alluding to his romantic relationships. Homo and hetero. Radical by 1950 standards, decently tame today. Aside from the 1976 film's portrayal of his relationship with Bast, most of the films focus on his relationships with women. In 1997's James Dean Race with Destiny, his relationship with actress Pier Angeli is the point of the narrative.
Can't help it, baby. I'm hot, very hot.
Oh, well. Here, maybe this will cool you down.
Before we're even 5 minutes in, Dean has goaded Angeli into going on a date with him and is demanding a second date with her.
Okay, bye.
Wait. I want to see you again. And maybe we could go for a ride or have a picnic or something.
As it goes, he meets her sister and mother, and she isn't very happy with Dean's bohemian way of life, very curtly stated here.
You call that a good song? Flip, a flop, a hold a girl, a upside down? A good song is a Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, and, of course, Vic Damone.
See, Angeli's mother would rather she marry Vic Damone, someone she viewed as more traditional, i.e. Italian, matching Angeli's own heritage, and Catholic. Dean's attempts to convince Angeli's mother he's worthy of Pier's hand, but fails at every turn, and is eventually told to stop pursuing her. Out of desperation and jealousy that he can't have Pier, he veers into an oncoming driver. So, there's a lot this movie gets wrong, or to be nice, amplifies to aid its drama.
I'm going to marry Vic.
No! Goddamn St. Christopher.
Whether or not Dean decided to end his life over Angeli's marriage to Damone is something only Dean would know, but for the sake of the story, it's given serious weight, and seemingly the only logical conclusion to get over his anger and sadness. Angeli also appears in 2015's Life with Dane DeHaan as Dean. Their relationship is seen to be loving and lustful. She is also the reason Dean decides to go back to Indiana instead of the East of Eden premiere, as he cites severe loneliness.
Don't make friends here.
What about me?
You're my lover, not my friend.
I can be both.
I'm serious. Come to New York with me.
In a biopic about Dean, Angeli thematically serves two purposes. One, she is a bedrock on which Dean lays his stability.
I lost my father some time ago. My mama, she raised us. She's been mother and father and friend. Mothers are very important.
2. She is a stand-in for the desperation he feels to have a female figure in his life who won't reject him.
Please. Forgive me. I didn't mean to. You gotta... Please, Mary, if I did anything...
Oh, Jimmy, just let me go.
Why? What did I do?
Outside forces bend her will, and she's forced to marry a man she allegedly doesn't love. It's a soap opera for the ages, hence the inclusion of its events in Dean canon. Dean loved Angeli. This is true, and this is commonly reported by his friends, but I don't think he would have ended his life over a romantic relationship. Dean probably would have moved to another person to make Angeli jealous, a tactic we saw in the 1976 film. However, Dean's most complicated relationship lies with his father, Wynton, who is, well, unsure how to go about loving his son.
It's not you, honey. Daddy's upset with me. He loves you. Come here. It's not your fault, Jimmy.
This is dominantly explored in the 2001 film, where Michael Moriarty won an Emmy for his performance as Wynton. Right off the bat, we see him not understanding Dean's aptitude for reciting poetry.
What is he saying?
It's a poem, Daddy.
He's memorized 3 entire verses of James Whitcomb Riley's Raggedy Man.
I'm trying to read my paper.
And a cold, hands-off approach after his wife dies.
Take good care of your grandma, Jim.
Take this out on the boy. And for God's sake, give him a kiss. Say something encouraging.
He has to be told by his sister-in-law to hug Dean before he leaves with him to the other side of the country. The 2015 film mentions this moment was the only time Dean ever saw his father cry.
Leaned over and kissed my mom's coffin. It was the only time I ever saw him cry.
Wynton was never a big fan of Dean's work, never really able to get a grasp on what made his son want to pursue such an endeavor. Perhaps it was due to the notion that actors are flamboyant, something he actively avoided as a humble dental technician. Perhaps he feared his wife's influence on making Dean soft, and resented that he would be unable to sculpt him into the man he thought he needed to be. In the 2001 film, Wynton increasingly distances himself from his son until he asks his new wife to lie for him about being away when he's clearly listening to the conversation from behind a curtain.
Can't you even talk to the boy, Winnie?
I can't.
I like this 2001 depiction due to Dean's insistence on sharing these landmark moments in his career with his father, but is constantly rebuffed, making him more determined to outdo himself. In the film's opening moments, Elia Kazan, director of East of Eden, grossly exploits Dean's father issues by having him do take after take of a scene involving the rejection of a gift from the actor who plays his father.
I'd be happy if you gave me something, well, something like your brother. Something honest and human and good. Now, don't be angry, son. If you want to give me a present, give me a good life. That's something I could value.
On the set of Rebel, Dean lashes out severely at Jim Backus, who plays his father, not stepping back after the camera stopped rolling while doing a take where he chokes him out.
You're killing it. You want to kill your own father.
And cut!
Jimmy, it's over.
Then, on the set of Giant, Dean lashes out at director George Stevens for presumably favoring co-star Rock Hudson to him.
Come on! Come on! You can put that long Rock Hudson around me, not me! You don't know what acting is, stupid son of a bitch! Come on, old man! Come on!
I guess that's a wrap for today.
All this culminates in Dean learning he might not be biologically related to Wynton, Winton is proud of Dean's success, however, and the two embrace. The narrative here is admirable, and the performance. Out of all the Deans, James Franco does the best job to mimic the actor by appearance. The poignancy of wanting to prove himself to his father is a strong choice thematically, and can be easily injected into each of Dean's films and actions. This is also the best route to take when telling a Dean relationship story, as we don't have to rely on anything soapy to get the point across. 2001's James Dean is smart and well crafted. Not having to do with relationships, but still a constant thread in these films, is Dean's constant loneliness. 2015's Life explores this the most thoroughly. Early in the film, we see Dean as a young actor who is disconnected with the studio system, despite being told he can succeed in it.
These were my actors, you understand? They followed certain rules. Basic rules for intelligent people. Then I made all the decisions that made them what they became. I cleared the path, you understand? I hear Nicky Ray's thinking of you for Rebel. Of course, he's thinking about a couple of others, too. I'm not sure we should emphasize the rebel in you, Jimmy.
Jack Warner, head of the studio, micromanages his career to the point of consternation. As an act of rebellion, Dean decides to head to Indiana to escape the impending change in his life, taking with him Life magazine photographer Dennis Stock.
This is Dennis Stock. He's a photographer for Life magazine.
At this point in his life, Dean is standing between obscurity and the premiere of East of Eden, which we now know would catapult him into worldwide stardom. The film's constant switch between simple farm life and fast-paced studio machine gives us a view on what Dean is standing to lose. We want to see him buck the system and live the secluded life he deserves while still giving outstanding performances. However, he finds Jack Warner unwilling to keep his newest discovery quiet, and the rural Indiana community unable to meld him back into society without treating him like a celebrity.
Where'd you hear that?
I don't know. I read it somewhere.
Oh, I hope one day it is true. You let me know if you hear that again, okay?
Do you think you'll ever come back and settle in Fairmount?
I hope, one day I will. You can't keep me away.
He has no stability in either world, leading to the feeling of being an outcast. Upon leaving the farm, he tells Stock that
everything changes so fast.
And then Dennis snaps a picture. In pursuing what he loves, he loses something else he values.
You about done with that?
Life is wonderful, if a little boring. As the subject of a film, Dean and Stock make for interesting co-leads. Their paths cross in this quiet moment, and their goals intertwine in a fascinating way. The production values are also very admirable, and the cinematography is beautiful. The screenplay does a good job in making sure we know how oppressive both Dean and Stock's professional environments are before being able to take off. This event is also shown in the 1976 version without Stock present. Even surrounded by people in one of the most populated places on the planet, these characters still feel lonely. In fact, at the end of all these films, Dean is driving his Porsche Spider with a passenger in each moment because he cannot be alone.
Sure you don't want to come to the races with me? Sandy's gonna follow in the station wagon. Plenty of room. Sure you don't want to come along?
This stems from early in his childhood when his mother died. She was the first person to truly love Dean and doted on him. So when she died, his world had been taken from him, and he was truly alone. This moment haunted him the rest of his life, something made clear in both 2001 and 2015.
I remember it. I just kept thinking, who am I gonna play with? Because that's all we'd ever do. She taught me how to play.
When we look at these films chronologically, it seems that the further that we get from the actual death of Dean, the more we're willing to examine not just his love life, not just his career, but the events that shaped the man we saw on screen. We don't need a comprehensive look at his career in order to understand why Dean was Dean, but rather the ins and outs of his life outside the career. The angst he shows in his movies, him standing as a symbol of the misunderstood young generation, wanting to wrap him up in a warm hug and say it's all going to be okay. These are the things that make us drawn to him. These aspects of his personal life, so closely tied to his screen persona, are what make him an enduring figure in Hollywood's canon, and why some find him an intriguing idol. There are two movies I want to talk about here, both relatively briefly. The first is Come Back to the Five and Dime, Jimmy Dean, which I have already done a pretty extensive analysis on that you can watch on your own time. Cliff's Notes: the film is a story of a James Dean fan club reunited 20 years after their last meeting, and how some have changed or not changed in the intervening time. Dean is not a figure who is literally present in this movie, but his presence is felt throughout due to a huge shrine set up in the film's titular Five and Dime. The women in the story idolize Dean, and one has even claimed to have his child. Another, Joanne, formerly Jo before a sex change operation, emulates Dean. I postulated in the other video that Jo didn't want to be Dean, but to become the kind of woman that would attract James Dean. Jo is the only male in the movie, and shows how fragile the image of Dean is. Despite his best efforts to emulate Dean, he is constantly ignored by the people in his life, even his best friends. Dean's image isn't what the people want, it's Dean himself. They have to settle with the facsimile. Jimmy Dean also parallels Dean's life in a way that its pervasive theme is that of friendship, and not to be wasteful of friendship. The women in the film are connected through Dean and disband due to the tragedy of Dean's death, but wouldn't otherwise care for one another. They use the others in the group to feel better about themselves or placate their feelings on certain subjects, things the actual Dean allegedly did. Jimmy Dean is a quiet, understated film that gives its audience a lot to chew on, not just about Dean, but how emulation and worship can warp our perception of the true value of what we have in front of us. The last movie we'll discuss is September 30th, 1955, a film titled after the date of Dean's death. Following a young man named Jimmy, the film chronicles his ups and downs in the days following the radio announcement of Dean's death. At first, Jimmy, played by Richard Thomas, is in complete shock.
Who do you say died?
I wasn't listening.
Oh, something about some movie star.
Listen.
He's Dean's biggest fan, at least in his friend group, and is crushed to hear his idol has passed. Another Dean fanatic, Billie Jean, is equally devastated, although Jimmy's friends don't really like her as much. Throughout the next few hours, Jimmy goes on a journey of strange escapades, but no one in his life can really understand why he's reacting the way he is. While holding a seance to summon the dead actor, a fire breaks out where Billie Jean ends up with third-degree burns and might not ever be the same. Let's start off by saying this. Richard Thomas is a good actor, and that he makes Jimmy so thoroughly enthralled with Dean that he becomes unlikable. Every action this character takes in serving his cult-like devotion to the actor becomes increasingly bizarre. He creates an Academy Award out of mud and sand and then strips down to his underwear and covers himself in the mixture too. He is now something Dean would want. To think that he and Billie Jean are the only people in the world really affected by Dean's death is selfish of Jimmy, but in the small sphere of their Alabama town, it's easy for them to come to this conclusion. They are the only two kids showing any kind of emotion in the wake of the tragedy, acting as though they actually knew the actor. And to an extent, they did.
It's so weird. It's just like the last scene from East of Eden. Expected that nurse out there to start looking around asking for something to read.
Jimmy's friends know that what they watch are just movies, that it's not really Dean's life on screen. But through his research, Jimmy has found many parallels between Dean's life and his roles, many of which we've already discussed. The climax of the story is that seance with Jimmy dressed as Dean and Billie Jean dressed as Vampira, one of Dean's Hollywood friends and host of her own spooky cable show a la Elvira. This is where the fanaticism between these two people really goes off the rails. Not only do these two kids think that they can hold a seance to summon a dead actor, but they believe that they are the only two people that he would want to communicate with in the wake of his death. Dean didn't know who these two were, and if he had, would he have cared? September 30th, 1955 is a fascinating movie because it shows us the depths and strength of Dean's image on a disenfranchised youth, a culture that had been underrepresented in the media until then. And the surge of teen films during the time only pushed Dean further to martyrdom, as he inspired many to pursue acting, to give truth to a feeling of longing and loneliness as he had. The film is an indictment of celebrity culture more than anything. There's nothing wrong with Dean existing as he did. The lengths fans go to emulate his actions and life are met with criticism here. Dean's life was anything but ordinary, but he came from such humble roots, remained humble throughout his meteoric rise, that his journey appears replicable. September 30th, 1955 is here to tell you that no craze comes without consequences, so try to be level-headed and maybe consume media like a normal fucking human. James Dean is a craze. From the jump, he was popular with young audiences because he put up a mirror to them and said, "Look, here's you." Exhilaratingly, this is met with positivity due to the freshness of this material, the look at troubled familial relationships, longing, loneliness, all from the perspective of a young man trying to figure it all out. We can see this from the very first film we discussed, a trashy documentary produced to cash in on the death of Dean before he was under the ground for barely a year, and Dean fans eat that shit up. But Dean was also a human being. He made mistakes. He chose unruly or unpopular paths because he's human. We cannot excuse all of them, but we can see them for what they were and evaluate whether or not he chose correctly. His journey is not one to be replicated because it can't be. Dean was unusual in the way his film roles fictionalized his own life, and perhaps intentionally so. Dean's performances ring so true because there's truth behind what he's battling against. It is this honesty that draws so many people to him, raw edges and all. If you come away with anything, come away with this. These films exist because the Dean mythos is so strange and so complex that it needs sharing, that his story is so legendary because he made it so. Whether you like the drama surrounding his love life, the relationship to his father, or the exploration of his longing, you have something out there for you to enjoy, all with the same figure at the helm. The different takes exist because he was so mythical, larger than life, and how he's chosen to be remembered is up to interpretation.